100 FM The Pike, Worcester's Classic Hits. This morning we have the honor of welcoming a great guest, one of my favorite funny guys, John Cleese. Good morning to you, John.
Thank you so much for pronouncing my last name correctly. Most people call it Cleese, and you got it absolutely right. It's Cleese. The family name, if you go back nearly 100 years, was, believe it or not, was Cheese. And then my dad went in the army and changed the H to an L, so it's Cleese. But everyone in America calls me Cleese. What was the last time you went into a supermarket and asked for cheddar cheese? So thanks for getting that right.
Hey, wait, is that why you went into that cheese shop to negotiate the vending of some cheesy comestibles?
No, that's a story that would take a lot longer than we actually have to tell. But it was a very strange and long story, and we just came up with the idea that we wanted a cheese shop that didn't have any cheese, and we wrote that as a result and never got on to writing the sketch that we'd intended to write after that.
It still makes us laugh about 50 years later. All right, we've got John Cleese. I was very tempted to make my first question be, what is your favorite color? I decided not to do that. About a man who was such an integral part of one of the greatest comedy troupes I believe we've ever seen, and that is Monty Python.
What do you mean one of the greatest? What do you mean one of the greatest comedy troupes?
Well, if I have anybody from Fireside Theater listening, they may be upset with me.
Oh, they were jolly good number twos, they were.
I've been called that myself a few times in my life. John, it's just such an iconic group. Monty Python first got going in the UK as the 60s were ending. Now, we didn't really get Monty Python, per se, here in America until a few years later. Was it a group of guys that had a lot of history together already, or did you guys just kind of come together as a ramshackle bunch?
Both, really. I mean, we have had a bit of history together. I mean, I wrote in Python with Graham Chapman, and we started to do that in Cambridge in my second year and Graham's third. So he and I have been writing together. Then my last year at Cambridge, I met Eric Idle, and I thought he was a very funny guy. And then about 2 years later, we got together as a group of writers by David Frost. He was very good at spotting talent, and he got us all writing for him in 66 and 67.
I see.
And then Graham and I went off and started writing Monty Python, but every Thursday afternoon we'd watch the funniest kids show I've ever seen, which was also the funniest show on British television, which was all of these other guys, plus Terry Gilliam, who joined them by then. And I rang him up one day and I said, why don't we all do a show together? And because we knew each other from David Frost's days writing for him, we said, yeah, okay, and we went along and had a meeting with a guy who asked us what we were going to do, and we basically said, we've no idea. And he stared at us for some time and then gave us 13 programs. It was all quite extraordinary.
I love it.
And when we started writing, we just no idea what we were going to be doing. It just developed.
We're speaking this morning with John Cleese, a longtime Monty Python man, and coming to the Hanover Theater in just a couple of weeks now, a big screen showing of the classic Monty Python film, The Holy Grail. Now, John, when your TV run was coming to its end in around 74 in the UK, the movie followed shortly thereafter. Was it a situation where you all looked around and said, all right, blokes, we're going to be done with the TV show. What do we do next?
Yeah, it was more or less that. If you look at the wonderful Woody Allen, he started off basically with sketch. He found a little way of sort of holding the sketches together in a framework, but he started writing 3 or 4 minute things. If you go right back to Take the Money and Run,
right,
or Bananas, or his earliest film, and then after you've done those for a time, you see, after we've been doing sketches for about 5 years, you just get interested. You just say, well, what do we do? We're used to doing this. Why don't we try something else? And you say, well, let's do a movie, and you all get rather excited, despite the fact you haven't the slightest idea how to write a movie, and you have no experience in doing it. And that's why when we first wrote the first script for Holy Grail, we threw away 90% of it. Can you believe that, Bruce?
I can't imagine what wound up on the cutting room floor.
The answer is it just changed shape completely. I think it was when Michael Palin suddenly wrote the wonderful scene where Graham Chapman, King Arthur, comes over the top of the hill with Patsy see, and the coconuts behind him. And somehow we all loved that scene so much. We all said, well, let's make the film about that. Let's make it about medieval times, because that wasn't the original concept.
What we're going to see on stage at the Hanover is you kind of acting as an MC and taking us through a watching of the film, but we're probably going to get some behind-the-scenes insight. Is that a good guess?
Oh, yes. I mean, what happens is people see the film, and of course people who've seen it 15 times don't have to see the film.
Right.
And then when the film finishes, my daughter, who is very funny, she's a stand-up comedian, Camilla Cleese. She's, go on YouTube, you'll see how funny she is. She's also extremely tall. And she comes out and introduces me, and then the audience asks us questions, because she's got some sort of an iPad there. I don't understand the technology, and people in the audience can send questions up to her, and she picks out the ones that are the most promising, which are usually the rudest ones, because the more boring questions, like, what's your favorite sketch, or why is Monty Python called Monty Python? They're perfectly decent questions, but they have boring answers. So she picks out mainly the rude ones, the insulting ones, and it's very good having my daughter doing that, because if we have people from local radio stations, they're much too respectful, and as anyone knows, the last thing that daughters are with their fathers is respectful.
As the father of two daughters myself, I know what you're talking about, John. Having you with me for
Yes.
Just having you with me for a few minutes here on the air has reminded me why I love your style of humor so much. This is going to be such a great show. It's coming in again to the Hanover Theater. The date is February 15th. Tickets are still available, and Mr. C, you can count on the fact that I will be there, anxious to enjoy the show just like the rest of the crowd. Come on to town and let's have some
fun. I want you to do something for me. I want you to ask me a really rude question.
All I've got to do is figure out how to work an iPad, and you've got it.
Well, bring your daughters.